All right. I guess it's my turn to finally make one of these videos. So, as you can tell from the title, I quit my job without another job lined up. And I'm making this video to share my experience with quitting my job without another job to show that it is possible and maybe share some advice for people that are also thinking of doing the same thing. So, the goal for this video is to answer the question, how do you know you should quit your job? Okay. And before I quit my job, I didn't know the answer to this question. And before I quit my job, I was doing something that probably a lot of you that are watching this video might be doing, which is searching online for questions like, should I quit my job? Or how do I know it's time to quit my job? Or can I quit my job? Or something along those lines. And that's what I did, right? Before I decided to quit my job. So I'm here to tell you how I decided to do that. And the answer to the question of how do you know when you should quit your job is actually pretty simple. For me, it was when you get past your breaking point, basically. So the answer is, when should you quit your job, or when do you know you should quit your job, is when you are past your breaking point. So I'll elaborate, because for me, it took me 5 things or 5 reasons to get me to my breaking point in my previous job. And that's when I quit. So for you, it might be more, it might be less, depending on what those things are and the severity of them. But I feel like those reasons that make you want to quit build up. So it might not be just one thing or 2 things, but it's like it might be those 2 things combined, right? Or it might be a third smaller thing when added to those first 2 things that kind of get you to your breaking point, and then that's when you quit. So really, the answer is quite simple, but I'll share my story, and then hopefully, or maybe you could see if there's any parallels in your life, or see if any of my reasons resonate with you as well. Okay, so I quit my job last year. So right now it's June 2026. So I quit my job in November 2025. And it's been 7.5 months since I've quit my job, and now I'm making this video. So I was working as a software developer for a company that specialized in nonprofit grant making. So we helped clients who wanted to pair up people that gave grants with people that applied for grants. So we wrote software and web apps for that. So I was a web app developer. So I got hired at the summer of 2022, and I quit at the end of 2025, so November of 2025. So I managed to stick it out for about 3.5 years. And that was really only, as you'll see, that was really only because I had a great manager along the way. So shout out to that one manager that really helped me to stick it out and save enough money to execute my plan to quit. So here are my 5 reasons that made me want to quit my job, which led me up to the breaking point, which actually made me quit my job here, or drove me over the edge, which led me to resign. Okay, reason number 1, lack of respect by coworkers. Okay, so the first reason or thing that made me want to quit was a lack of respect that I felt at the company. So this is the first thing that showed up in this job, or the first reason that appeared on the list here, or it appeared quite early. Actually appeared right after I got hired here that I noticed this. That made me think like, okay, I'm gonna quit this place, and made me want to plan my exit really here. Okay, so maybe it was a good sign, because this reason showed up early, and then it made me want to develop a plan to quit my job here, right? And then maybe if it didn't show up that early, I wouldn't have started to plan early, and then maybe wouldn't have saved enough to execute my plan for quitting. Okay, but anyways, going back to this first reason. So the managers at this place, for whatever reason, were very egoistic or egotistic. Egoistic, I'm not sure that's a word. Egotistic, and acted pretty much superior to everybody else in the company, and then was, doing typical power trip things like barking orders, just telling people to just treating people with not a lot of respect, whenever they were talking to them. And I love reading the Glassdoor reviews of my company because I feel validated that I'm not the only one feeling this way. Okay, because on the Glassdoor reviews, there's other people that mention the same thing that I'm mentioning, which is that the managers were very rude to people that weren't managers. So like I mentioned, the one saving grace that really helped me to stay at this job for longer than I thought I would have stayed was the one manager in between two toxic managers that I had. So I had one manager that was super rude, and I didn't get along with her. And she was the reason that I started to make the plan to quit in the first place. Okay. But then she got actually laid off for whatever reason, which I was happy about. And afterwards, I got switched on to a second manager who was actually very nice. And I got along with him very well. And we were able to, work efficiently, solve problems as they came along, without as much friction as it was with the first manager here. So that kind of extended my time at the company there. But then, so my second manager was good, but then my third manager was equally horrible as my first manager here, the third manager, who was a guy. So really, a bad and rude manager really demoralizes a team and just makes work inefficient and made me want to quit. So that was the first reason. And on a personal note here, that was part of this reason, one thing that really bugged me was that people at this company addressed each other with hey instead of hello, okay, or hi, or the person's name. So I thought that was really rude. I'm not sure if anyone else agrees with me here, and unprofessional. And I say that I'm not sure if anyone else agrees with me here because I know that this happens in other corporate settings as well. Because I watched a presentation of my online bank where they were announcing a new product or whatever. And then they were addressing each other using hey as well, right? So they were saying hey, Adam, thanks for saying that or whatever. I was like, man, I don't know. How do you even address your coworkers like that? I'm not sure. Because I don't even address my friends like that. I don't say hey, or I just say hello or hi. Because you know what I really think? I think it's more of a passive aggressive thing to slight somebody before you even begin a conversation with them by beginning with hey. It's saying I don't respect you. It's leading your sentence with I don't respect you, but here's what I have to say when you say that. But maybe that's the reason people do that, right? Because they they secretly hate each other at the company, but they want to be passive aggressive with each other, so they say hey instead of hi. But yeah, that was my first reason. Really disrespectful and rude culture at the company, especially by the managers. Okay, reason number 2 is a disorganized company. So within the 3 years I was working there, I got moved around 3 times to 3 different teams, as I mentioned here, with 3 different managers. Okay, so working on different projects with different clients that we had here. So normally that's fine, right? Where in a normal company you might be moved around within the 3 or 4 years that you work at a company. You might work on different projects in your time there, so that's fine. But in this company, the processes were not well documented here, right? So in fact, they pretty much weren't documented at all. So as part of the developer or development team, for coding best practices for our web apps and patterns, code patterns, they weren't documented in terms of best practices, right? So people were just doing their own thing with code across different projects. And the worst part about moving to a different project with this lack of process was that once you got onto a different project, you picked up the work of the half finished work of other people, other developers that use their own style of code or their own patterns in code, which which is disorienting to say the least. Okay, so it made things very messy, very bug filled, and inefficient. And that led to like one of the kind of repeating feelings, which was failure that I felt during this company, my time at this company, because we would consistently deliver late and deliver products that had bugs in it because we didn't know how to test properly as a team because of this lack of process. Like we didn't have any proper testing procedures, so everyone just kind of did their own testing. So some edge cases might have been missed for one, set of developers where it was checked for another project. So it was inconsistent. And there was a lack of guidance too, right? So on top of the process not being documented in terms of like how do we implement this one feature, right? Consistently across different projects, like for example, like a login feature or something like that. People do their own thing. And on top of that, there were the senior members of the company, the senior developers / managers or whatever, team leads. They wouldn't have time to mentor people because of the fact that projects were always late because of a lack of best practices and consistency, right? So they were busy with like emergency bug fixing or things like that, where they were doing their own projects and then also like handling emergencies from different projects as they came up due to this like structural lack of documentation and lack of processes here. So overall, just felt very chaotic and disorganized. I don't want to have that feeling anymore of failure and disorganization. So that was reason number 2 that made me want to quit my job. Okay, we're back. Sorry, I had to grab a jacket and a drink. My throat was getting dry. Okay, so the third reason for why I quit my job was I did not see myself at the company for the long term. Okay, so this next reason is kind of a mixed bag. So I think seeing yourself at the company involves a few things, and there were not many for me in my case. Okay, so the only kind of reason that I saw that would make me stay was the salary and the fact that the job was work from home. Okay, so when I quit, my job was around 100,000 Canadian dollars a year before bonuses. But as we'll see, no amount of money is worth it when it gets to a breaking point. Okay, so when you get to really, it's as you'll see in my reflections video. No amount of money is worth your health and stress, which is kind of foreshadowing one of my reasons here. Okay, so aside from this work from home job and salary, I didn't see like too much else that would make me want to stay at the company. Conversely, I saw a lot of things that made me want to leave, right? So such as like rude coworkers that I didn't want to be around or work with. In addition, the job itself, although it was okay, like it wasn't really a reason for me to want to quit in terms of like hating the job. Like the clients were good, right? Which was it could have been worse, right? Where the clients were bad. So I enjoyed the clients that we worked with. I enjoyed the work that we did. But it wasn't what I wanted to do, right? It wasn't like the type of web apps that I wanted to develop. It wasn't, the type of front end I wanted to build for my users. So I didn't see myself continuing in that kind of niche of web development anymore. Okay, so in the 3.5 years that I was working at that job, I stayed at the same position, just a regular web developer or developer role in that job. If there were any senior or manager positions, usually external candidate would fill it up, and people really moved up, which really was a function of the disorganization because we were needed to do the grunt work, right? So we couldn't move up because we were needed at our current role to continue keeping the machine going, right? So if new positions were needed, then the only solution was to somebody from the outside. So there wasn't really a chance for anybody inside to level up because they were just keeping the wheels spinning. So I knew that I needed to quit, or I would quit at some point, because that this job wasn't a career for me. So I knew I needed to look and plan for an escape while I still had time, right? Before this job turned into a career, right? If I sat too long without making an exit plan. Okay. So for the fourth reason that I quit my job, which is the penultimate reason, is job uncertainty and layoffs. Okay, so the fourth reason isn't the reason why I went past my breaking point, but this is the catalyst of why my health and stress went beyond my breaking point, which led me to quit. Okay. So beginning in like 2024 and 2025, a lot of tech companies began doing these mass layoffs here, as you'll see with these headlines, because they overhired during the post-pandemic economic recovery between like 2022 and like 2024. So throughout that time, people at my job got laid off. So I'm talking about 2024 and 2025. People started getting laid off about a year before I quit, right? So I quit in 2025, and people started getting laid off starting in like January of 2024. But the biggest wave, so they got laid off in waves during that time from 24 to 25. But the biggest wave came at the end of 2025, right before I quit. So you can see where this is going, right? So they fired 20% of the company in one day, and everyone who remained, I remember slacking and Teams messaging my teammates that were left behind, and everyone was just shocked because we knew that the rest of the work would just come back to us, and deadlines would still have to be met, so we would just have to be working overtime a lot there, right? So yeah, also it felt like I was going to be laid off too, so like that didn't feel very secure in the back of my mind either. So with that thought, it actually made the idea of quitting like more of like choosing when you would exit rather than being forced out and a layoff. Because I know the people that got laid off, my ex coworkers here, actually they're all my ex coworkers now, but the ones that got laid off, some of them all of them were hit out of the blue, right? This came out of the blue, and some of them were definitely more unprepared than I was, who was already planning an escape in the back of my mind. So in terms of like financially unprepared, right? So people had mortgages, people had kids to feed and clothe and stuff like that. So that definitely hit them harder than someone like me who kind of had a more controlled planned exit of the company here. Not having job security also made me incentivized me to want to be more secure and have a exit plan rather than looking for one after the fact. Okay, now it's time for the fifth and final reason, and the reason that pushed me over the edge and made me quit my job, which is health and stress, as I alluded to before. Okay, so I didn't realize how much my health and stress were being affected by my job until after I quit my job. So even before, right? So as I was working, before we got to that last layoff, which pushed my health and stress over the edge, it was already on the decline, right? So as I said in the beginning of this video, the reason or the point at which you have to quit your job is when you're past your breaking point. But before you pass your breaking point, the stress and whatever, all the negativity builds up until the breaking point, right? So I didn't know how much it was building up in me before I quit my job is what I'm trying to say. So with the chaos and disorganization in the company and the rude people and the thought of layoffs looming in the back of the head of everybody, but mostly because of the chaos and just lack of experience and process at the company, I mentioned how projects were always delayed. So not just the processes were undocumented and developers were doing their own thing, but the chaos extended beyond the developers here. So there was also projects were handled by project managers, there's business analysts, and then there's also the developers who did the work. But the business analysts who got the requirements and kind of understood the business processes that we were trying to design and implement in our web apps, often got the requirements wrong, or it could be a function of the clients changing their mind as well. And the project manager is not pushing back on clients changing their mind after the fact. So sometimes we would build things with one set of requirements, and then the client might change their mind, and then the project managers might allow that here, right? So for whatever like goodwill reason or whatever, we the developers would be stuck making the change. However, the deadline or the amount of time we would have to do the project in totality would still remain the same. So in effect, we sometimes had to do the same work twice or three times because of either bugs or changing requirements here. So all that is to say that we worked a lot. Okay, so because the expectations for one deadline for the deadlines were not the reality of what the work was, right? So the expectations might have been only like 1/3 or 1/4 the amount of actual work that had to be done or redone or retested here, depending on whatever the reason might be, like bug fixes or the client requirements change or whatever. Okay, so we had to work a lot of unpaid overtime to make up for it, right? So for changing requirements or bug fixing or picking up the slack of other people, we would work on the evenings, so instead of 9 to 5, it would be like a 9 to 8 or 9 to 9, and on Saturdays and even Sundays as well, right? So that extended what the scope of like work really was in terms of work-life balance and what work was like on someone's schedule. We were working the evenings and weekends, and even though this is a work from home job, it became more demanding than a work from office job. Because, like I said, instead of a 9 to 5, it became a 9 to 9, basically, from Monday to Sunday, instead of a Monday to Friday. So how did this affect my health and stress? So I was definitely overworked and complaining. I remember messaging my friends on like Messenger and WhatsApp basically saying some variation of "I'm so stressed" or "I hate my job" every day. Some like one version of that text to my friends every day would be sent. I had trouble like falling asleep. And I remember like when I went to bed, there would always be a sense of dread when I was like closing my eyes, getting ready to bed, because I knew I was thinking about the work that was coming the next day. So that really made me not want to fall asleep or not want to wake up, because I knew how much work there was coming the next day. So instead of having the Sunday scaries like just on Sunday, I had it every day, basically. And I'm sure like for those of you that are like working in different industries that also are in a job that makes you wanna quit, might feel the same as well, right? Where you're just going to sleep and you're feeling like, oh my God, there's another day of work tomorrow and I can't wait till it's over, and you want to figure out how to make it stop. So yeah, so I definitely felt that if you have that experience. And in addition to the poor sleep and stress, which was causing muscle tightness in my body, and also like just like low energy because I wasn't getting the sleep I was needing here, like bags under my eyes, just a low level of energy. I was also drinking and smoking a lot to try to escape. Okay, so I usually don't really drink. Okay, but I remember drinking like 3 or 4 whiskey colas like a week. After work, like right after work. I remember like at like 6 or 7 p.m. if I'm close the laptop, I would just run upstairs because I work in the basement of my parents' house, and I would run upstairs and then I would just pop open a Coke and pour a shot of whiskey and drink that. Oh my God, it was so bad because I don't really drink, right? And once I quit, like I stopped drinking, so it was like night and day in terms of the smoking and drinking that was used to kind of cope with the stress. So once I quit, like I could reflect and just say like, whoa, that was like too much. I haven't needed to do that because there's no stress to eliminate anymore with smoking and drinking. And then finally, in terms of health and stress, my eyes were like getting destroyed. So staring at a screen for like 9 hours a day has made my eyes worse. So like even now, 7 months later, like I wear glasses, but before I could see pretty fine without my glasses, but now my myopia or nearsightedness has like increased so much, so I can't see things that are far away now without my without my glasses, and it's horrible. Maybe I'll just have to do laser eye surgery to correct it. Yeah, so everything's super blurry now. So I need to consider whether my next job is going to be like this in terms of staring at screens for a long period of time. So if you're also doing a screen job, that's something to consider as well. Okay, so how did this reason push me to my breaking point? So the layoffs, right? Once the layoffs happened, something in my unconscious clicked. Basically, my unconscious told me like, bro, we are already at our limit. If these layoffs are gonna cause you to have to work so much more, because the projects still needed to be done with 20% less of the workforce, which meant that everyone had to work overtime. So my unconscious was telling me that this was unsustainable, right? We couldn't do this anymore. This is the breaking point. So this is I already knew before the layoffs. I was working beyond the maximum, so I knew my body couldn't take it anymore. So I remember during the layoff announcement because they had a company wide meeting to let everybody know. I remember during that announcement, I thought to myself okay, this is it. It's time to quit. So I felt my breaking point being crossed subconsciously, and then that led me to, hand in my resignation. But even then, I had to really take a weekend to really reconsider my options and whether or not my plan to quit was ready to be executed, because I planned to quit in March of 2026, but at that time it was November of 2025. So it was a little bit early in terms of my timeline to quit. So I wasn't fully ready, but I decided that I had to, right? So kind of the choice was made for me in terms of my breaking point being crossed, leaving me with no other choice. So I had to pull the ripcord and, grab my parachute and handed in my resignation the following week. Now that I've quit my job, and as I'll mention in my kind of reflection video down the line, I can definitely say that your job is not worth sacrificing your health or building up stress so much that you're drinking and smoking like me to cope with that stress. So if your job is making your body worse, then you should definitely plan to quit your job as soon as possible. For me, my body could not have sustained the abuse I was putting it through for the long term if I had tried to stick it out for longer than if I didn't quit. Right. So those are my 5 reasons that made me want to quit my job, and how they led me to go past my breaking point, which was about my health and stress. So again, for you, it may be more or less reasons that build up before you break, but it depends on really what they are, right? So your reasons might be different than mine. Right? I think health and stress is a pretty universal reason. Same with envisioning whether or not you see yourself at the company. I think that's a pretty general reason as well. And maybe you're more thick-skinned than I am in terms of handling, rude coworkers. So maybe that might not be a reason for you, but maybe there might be another reason for you, such as commuting, right? So for me, it was a work from home job, so I didn't have that reason to consider, right? So yeah, your reasons might be different, but the important thing is to recognize that, or to feel when you're close to your breaking point, and to have a plan to execute and escape. And to escape when you get to that point, right? So it's important to have a plan in place so that when you do get to that breaking point, you can execute that plan and then get out of there, and then not have to worry about working at a job that is making you feel horrible. So that's the topic of the next video in terms of my plan to escape my job, how I planned it, how I saved to execute it, and I guess what happened afterwards here. Right. So thanks for watching this video. Hope to see you in the next one if you're interested in hearing about how I saved enough money to quit my job without another job lined up. Thanks.